So I'm going to ask you some questions, but first I'd like to ask you, what was it that really caught your attention in each other's presentation? If there was something that you really thought, this is something that I need to, look into. Anyone?
Yeah, should I start?
You can start.
In Daniel's, I really like the way you go in and explore the importance of the qualities and the values on the landscape, and you advocate for coupling that to this green energy process. I think that link is completely lacking. And it's this non-recognition of how important the landscape is in terms of identity and culture for local residents. That means you never address those concerns of this. So I think that was great. And in yours, I love the fact you brought systematic data also from several countries to be able to see how this topic is perceived in comparison with, let's say, France, Germany, and so on.
Daniel?
No, I can agree with you when it comes to bringing your analysis that comparing to other countries. I think that was really, I bring that with me to see how the other countries. But then I was also thinking with your presentation why Norway is so different. Is it because it's very far away from the continent? I mean, are there geographical aspects of why it's so different compared to these much more European, Central European countries? It's a question I would like to have to you. And then coming back to you, what I really happy that you mentioned the word democracy many times. Coming back to that from the large scale, but also to this. And then another thing that I really welcome is that you start to say this protests, they're the beginning. Don't define them as stoppers, but actually it's the beginning of a dialogue. And that is very valuable to have in mind. So we don't demonize them and I say I'm not able to speak with you, but it's rather big. And you explain it too. Many times it has to do because they have not been part of that kind of dialogue. Maybe that's where it's lacking. So that is something that I really welcome that you underscore.
Yeah, and starting with you, I think you gave a really nice comprehensive overview of understanding social acceptance. And I agree with Daniel here that the way you really pulled in the importance of democratic legitimacy, if anything, and keeping these processes and the governance aspects democratic are very important, and also for that matter, the difference just between acceptance and support and the way we kind of view these matters in terms of and how we interact with the engagement, because seeing it as engagement and continuously engagement rather than a hinder to kind of go past. I think that is important. And back to your presentation and also your question, I think that connects. I do think what I find really interesting, looking at landscapes and ideas of landscapes and the narratives you really connect to them, is really important. And in my research, where we do look very systematically at this data, we do often talk about, rural areas versus urban areas, but then maybe we stop a bit at that, and then really looking into kind of what the kind of meaning you put into these processes and the landscape changes, for example, and the things you get out of it. It's really important. And I do think when it comes to Norway that there is something about the narrative you have about these processes that is quite significant for the development we see in terms of public opinion. What kind of narrative you use when speaking of wind energy, for example, and the consequences of developing wind energy.
Just one thing, and correct me here if I'm wrong, but when you do, the way I understand it, also as a political scientist, when you do polls, it's a two-way communication. When you're making the question, do you like this, yes or no? You're also affecting, that we should talk about certain questions.
You make it salient to a degree, of course, because that is a thing with
I'm intervening.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
No, though it was, the direction was fantastic. I'd like to take the Norwegian example because it's a hard example. I mean, it's really eye-opening. Is there something that your government, the politicians, should have actually done when they realized that, okay, now we're going the wrong direction? And is there something now that Denmark and Sweden, and, you know, like Finland is not included in the panel, but that, you know, we should really study and lessons, what are the lessons that we should learn?
To be sure, and I think part of the answer is what you were just saying about how hard it is really to do something about it once it goes this far. So just action earlier on, once you kind of saw this development happening, is important. And you could say to some degree there was actions. You know, they did pause the concessions, they had like a rework and another look at it. But you could say maybe it's too little, too late. I think in Norway, again, it's a complex issue, but this whole thing of how the process proceeded, taking these local concerns seriously from the beginning, where we do see a lot of local case studies again, where there really was a perception that once concerns were raised, these were not taken seriously. So I do think it is all about communication in these processes and having a just process more than anything, which also does connect to distributional concerns in terms of benefits and costs and so on.
It's of course easy to say a just process, but then we should really think about what does it mean in practice. But that will be my next question. But I'd like to lessons learned, if there are some.
Well, I think it would be like a combination between this measurement on large scale and then bringing that into that very, very local approach. To bring that data into the local approach, and then eventually forget about the data and take, this dialogue is taking place right now about our place now. So that kind of scale of both geographies and time and the amount of people, national scale or a very local scale, like you pointed out.
And then I think we need to have a discourse about what is the value for our societies of this green transition, and what is the value this kind of energy cooperation and energy self-sufficiency in the Nordics will give us. And it is very much about being an independent stakeholder in the future. Somehow we have to be able to explain that to the normal citizens. So the politicians need to come on stage as leaders to make that case. And I do find, I would say, in Denmark, it's been really hard to make politicians come forward and defend some of those projects because they know it can be a losing case with citizens.
Exactly.
Go ahead. Yeah, and if I can reply to that, I do think communicating and discussing these things, deliberating, is very important, and also to do so in a comprehensive manner, you could say, because these issues, at least the Norwegian debates, can very quickly become quite technical. We talk about needing to develop this and this energy and so forth, and you very quickly kind of lose these main points, perhaps, of why are we actually doing this, or like what is the value in doing it.
And then you have, I think, to speak to people's feelings, like somebody said yesterday. People are not rational machines. They will not be convinced by big graphs or by a lot of technical numbers. They are convinced with feelings and identity and belonging. And that's the language we have to speak about this.
Yeah. But it's not that easy because obviously it is the elite speaking.
Yes.
Daniel.
Am I elite?
Are you?
Yes,
yes, you are.
Yes,
you were just talking about your handmade shoes.
Or did I? No, that's true, and that's the challenge of language and education is growing. We are sitting here talking about the dialogues. I have this language, and so how do I transform that language into a local context? And I have experienced many times in Orsa, where the director of municipality, he was actually doing like this. You have to speak the language of our people here, Daniel. Nobody understands you. Yeah. That was a great challenge for me to transform. I needed to transform my language into that. Yeah. So it became a challenge for me, and I'm still doing that trouble.
Yeah. Please go deeper into that, because I know you've all worked or studied, what really works and what doesn't. So what does work when you go into the local community and try to convince them? What are the, really tangible? Somebody was asking for a tool set. Let's go into the tool set.
Well, one thing that does work is, the belief of the need of that kind of dialogue that you pointed out. We've been running dialogues where you have 35 people and people telling you, I don't trust you. You look like an elite. I don't trust your data. I think you're manipulating me. And then you still have to stand there and represent that dialogue. You just have to stand there, represent that dialogue and say, okay, I understand you, I agree with you, but please do not leave this conversation. Don't do that, because this is another thing that we add. What happens if we don't have a dialogue? If you leave that, things will still transform, change somehow. So there is also the scenario of not doing anything. We produce a bunch of scenarios of how it can be, like this, but what if the scenario is also we don't do anything, we just neglect it? Transformation will come in one another way. So stay here. But the one leading that kind of process needs to tolerate that kind of conversations.
And if I am to add on that, I would say a good conversation with citizens would not be like the three of us on a stage talking to the citizens. It's completely different kind of dialogues where there's not somebody talking to others, but a local community discussing what is the quality and the values in their landscapes and their local community going forwards, and actually having them driving the processes rather than people from the outside trying to do it. And I think staging those processes is actually the real challenge for people coming into this.
Why is it so hard? Because, I mean, it seems obvious that this is how it should be done. We all know it should be done like this. Why isn't it done like that?
There's a lot is in the economic model, because it's often developers coming from the outside, and actually they talk not with the municipality, they talk with the landowners, the local landowners who they buy the land for, and they can have these dialogues and buy the land, and then you have a big project and you can do nothing. So actually there's not necessarily a tripartite process where the local authority is part of this.
I just would like to add, I mean, we are trying out, I think everyone of us is doing, we have a pilot right now where we put together the Swedish Heritage Association. So the Heritage Association, who defines very much landscapes as cultural values, historical cultural values, and then we have the Wind Power Association. So both of them speaks about landscapes, but in very different ways. So the first step was to make them to sit together and talk about landscapes and to find a common language. Next step was to go out there to the fields with their members. So members from this little, organization, and then bringing wind power companies and say, let's talk about, landscapes, not connected to a project, because that you pointed out, then it's too late. But rather, hey, how do I understand landscapes? And one thing that happened is suddenly, those people from these heritage organizations, when they understood that this kind of samrådsprocesser, this kind of, what do you call it, samråd in English now? Samråd, this kind of obligatory dialogue process by the law, when they understood that companies have to pay for that and then the project does not happen, many of them felt, wow, that's a great loss of money for you. And they say, yes. So only that gave, a perception of misunderstandings and then back to understanding each other. So that's one way of, who talks about landscapes, pull them together to the table and then triple down.
Marte, I see you are nodding. Do you want to add?
I can, of course, I have less experience with local acceptance than the two of you, I think. But the experience I do have really do mirror what you say. It's one thing to create a dialogue in a language everyone can understand, but just being invited to the table to begin with, I get the impression that one of the things that has gone wrong in Norway earlier on has been precisely that people have not really experienced having a seat at the table at all, right? And not experiencing also that their local representatives have done a good job in communicating what this project might actually entail in terms of whether it's nature damages or noise or light and so on. And also when we have forums such as this, kind of inviting to the table even here, because I do get the impression from the very preliminary interviews I have done that this feeling of not being even invited to the table, of this being a business interest more than anything, business and academia, is part of the problem.
And maybe one additional problem when you ask why is this not prioritized more, I think those processes are often driven by quite technically educated staff who doesn't have a background in like social sciences or understand human processes. Those people sit elsewhere in the local authority. So when this is driven by the technical people, they just don't know how to incorporate it, and they probably don't even recognize this dimension at all. It's very similar when social service people drive technical processes that completely breaks also. So it's really about how you can work cross-sectoral, cross-competence-wise to make sure you have a holistic process.
Yeah. Well, you've all said that it needs to be also about real value. It's not just the acceptance, but it's about real value. But is it actually so that in some cases, or even many cases, there is no real value to the local people? I mean, this might be a bit of a,
But
not a popular question, but...
But you saw the examples. There could be a lot of value.
Yeah.
And many of those municipalities, they really don't have a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
Industry is going down. People are moving out. The youngsters go to live elsewhere. It is factually a good business case for them. So there could be value, but you have to make it a business case for them too.
Yeah. Do you want to comment?
No, I agree. I would like to say, there is always a value.
There's always
a value.
Yeah.
The question is, what measure you have to measure the value.
Exactly.
So do we only measure it by economic growth and population growth, or can we value that, okay, population growth is decreasing, what values do we have in that kind of future? So,
and how to make people see them as valuable.
But again, if we correlate the question of value that has to do with economic progress and has to do with population growth, if we connect it so strongly, that will be the value we're looking for, and that will in the demographic situation in the Nordics and Europe, that value is the gap is growing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think there is always some value, but kind of how you define that value and communicate that value matters. And perhaps also there is a point of not also overestimating that value in terms of, for example, promising new job places and so on, if that is actually a limited... so being clear, what is the value here? I think it's important to kind of hinder these backlashes at least. Yeah.
I would like to throw in, speaking about values, just the word transition, omställning, the value of that has changed from something that we strongly believe in, almost like evangelical, to today's very much has a different taste, and so that value has changed. Part of that values are connected also to these grand narratives, these grand companies. Good. But now it's the challenge that you have this large-scale money coming to a local community, and then some projects have started to fail in the Swedish context, or have failed. And that has changed the value of omställning. So we should be careful with these UFOs just arriving and saying, we're going to... Not saying not, but we should be careful with that and maybe engage them again from the very local.
Yes, yeah. And actually, I think you should engage them around defining what the value should be for them.
Yeah.
Don't come and tell them, you will have so many jobs. Engage in a conversation where you make them define what kind of values should come out of this, and enter in this value discussion also surrounding the landscape. Like the first example I brought from Kalundborg, they actually had a dialogue with community about how landscape quality could be preserved. How could they put the solar cell in a way that this historical identity, which meant a lot for them, was preserved? And they were able to land a solution. So it's really about unpacking dialogue with the community.
Daniel, did you want to add something? I saw you...
Always no.
Oh, no. Okay.
Well,
Marte, you had divided resistance behind three reasons, if I'm right. There was the process and procedural justice. People don't feel that it's just. Then there were distribution of costs and benefits. And then the landscape and environmental impact. So I don't know if it's too much to ask if you can say, okay, dealing with the process and procedural justice, what needs to be done in order for people to feel that it's just?
Yeah, I do think we've touched upon, some of these already, and at the risk of repeating myself.
I want you to repeat, because we're
Yeah, exactly. I think starting early on with communication and real communication, where you are willing to adjust your plans accordingly, I think is important. to also speak to all parts of society, I think is also important. And a lot of the research we do see also building on what I suspect was the content of yesterday's presentation on climate opposition. We see that there are groups in society that are more opposed towards, one thing is climate politics, but also renewable energy in general. And people, perhaps like most people in this room, higher educated from urban areas, for us, at least in our results, we see that it does not matter so much with these characteristics, actually. We want more climate politics, we want more renewable energy. We don't care so much if there are local shares of ownership or if the municipalities have a say and so on at the general citizen level. So I think really listening to all parts of society in these processes are important. And I do think good regulations and guidelines at all levels is important for that to actually happen, and it's not only to be something we speak about. Yeah.
Do you want to add something?
Yes, I would like to, two things. One question is like, to this, when we make polls, is there a challenge that our understanding of time, this nowness, is just expanding? The nowness is just expanding and taken from the past and taken from the future. And when you have social media, when you have polls asking how you think about this, how do you think about that, how do you think about that, that nowness is just expands. I mean, this is my sense. Question to you.
Of course, yeah. There are really important temporal dimensions here. As you see, it varies on the local level, people's reactions to these. It varies whether or not it's something that salients to them or something, and so forth, if that answers your question. But yes, we get more interconnected. We see right now this and this and this, and this municipality. I mean, for sure.
We are a learning conference, and we don't just talk the talk, but we walk the walk. So that's why we're going to open the discussion to the public here, because you are the participants, and we don't want to just keep you silent. So who would want to ask something? Now is your possibility. Julia has the microphone, and she can come and...
Yep. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you for the presentations, and thank you for the discussion. I'm Marte Skogen from LUT University. We work in a project that has the Finnish Renewables, former Finnish Wind Power Association, one of the stakeholders. And I had a question for Christine about this kind of, because this is something I heard from them when we had a workshop with them. You are saying that with the public, you have to kind of inform them at the right time. But when you do these installations of energy in the where people live, there actually is often not a good time to do it. Because if you tell people too early, you make them anxious, you are starting to kind of affect their behavior, and the project might not realize anyway. But if you tell them afterwards, it's also not the right time. So the Wind Energy Association or Finnish Renewables kind of say that they don't know what is the right time to involve the people. Do you have any from Denmark, any solution to this conundrum?
Yes. I think you said it a bit yourself, because no matter at what time you inform people, they are just not happy. This is a change. They don't experience it's a change to the better, and they're not asked for their opinion. So I would say all experience point that the earlier you inform them, and not just inform them, but take them on board, have them co-negotiate how this is going to happen, and make sure they have maybe co-ownership or something influence. That's all evidence points. That is the better strategy. But yes, it sucks. I mean, it is much easier to just do your project and not have to talk to the citizens. But I think on long term, that is the better strategy.
There's a question on the right here.
We had one here as well, so I'm going to start
go
there.
Ahead. Yeah, sure.
That's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, Bergen Luder from LUT University. What's your opinion on the no-go zones of the projects in which they should not go ahead? They should be shut down before they actually go to the operational phase.
Do you want to elaborate?
Well, we've been talking about acceptance and about projects going through, about convincing local communities that projects should go through. But maybe some proposed projects should not go through.
Yeah,
What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, sure. I agree with you. I mean, when we talk at social acceptance, does it only mean that I, as a citizen, should accept this project, it also means two directions. Maybe the companies to accept that this will not take place. So the acceptance needs to go from both directions. That's very. We sometimes we underscore that also when working out there.
Does somebody else want to comment on this or no?
Hello, I'm Heidi from Renewable Sweden. I was thinking, I love the democratic aspect and all that. And I love the dialogues. But when I meet the public, so I can feel that it's so hard to not promise too much what they actually can make a difference in, because we have the legal issues, we have the technical issues, and it's not just that, we just do like you wish, because we have the environmental code that we have to access and do. So I find it more and more difficult. Where can we actually meet? Where can I let them in to be participants in this project?
Well, ideally, I think that I completely recognize what you think. And I think in this transparent dialogue, it's really important to be very open about where they can influence and what cannot be influenced. Yeah. But I think in all cases, it is very clever to invite local community inside how you define and shape your project. Because, of course, there will be things that cannot be changed given regulations, but certainly they can have impact and ideas about where to put this, how to put it, how large should it be, all that stuff.
Yeah. Two more. Daniel wanted to comment on
sorry.
I think my answer will be something like this too. But when you say also the public, I think it's very valuable that you, me, we're also the public. I mean, if you operate as a company, you still operate as a company within a democratic system. And I think it's very important for a company to understand that you operate in a democratic system. You're not operating in Saudi Arabia or China or somewhere else, where you don't need the public, where you could be, So I think it's very valuable to understand what does it mean for me to be a company, to operate in a democratic system. Then it means to have the headaches that you just pointed out. And that will be my answer, because we live in a democratic system. And I would like to throw one question or encourage another person to make a question. I had a very interesting conversation with you, and that was about physics, because we can talk about democratic process and put the electricity very close. So I leave it to you, but then you also explain. But physics, electricity does not only work like that. So we have to bring in the dimensions of physics into here. Please come.
Yes. So, hi, Anders from SynPower. That's true. I mean, we can think about any local democratic system we want, but the physics doesn't work like that. Physics works in the way physics works. So if we put a windmill next to a factory, it doesn't mean that the windmill will power the factory. It means that the windmill will produce power that is put to the grid, that is sold in the power market, that is then procured by the industry. It's not necessarily 100% clean just because we put it close to them. Sadly, I wish it was, because if it's going to be that way, you need to disconnect both the production site and the consumption site and connect them to each other, which means they need to have backup systems, yada yada, a lot of technical issues. So it may look nice, but there's physics and market conditions tied to this. And I actually have a question back then. Because you, Christine, talked about, I asked a question about learning from the stories, I mean, using the customer success stories in order to progress. How are we learning between the countries then? So, I mean, we have Renewable Sweden here, Renewable Finland, and Norway.
Yes.
Are we learning?
Yes, I could throw that question maybe to Klaus or Mai and ask what... I have to say, I meet a lot of conscience in Denmark about this topic. There are many big conferences and so on. I don't see a lot of Nordic dialogue, but maybe I just don't come the right places. I know if you guys want to share.
It's an issue that's up in debate between the senior officials between the Nordic countries, but it is still unmet.
Right.
It's on.
It's working. Okay. I just say that there's not much Nordic cooperation going on a governmental level. the senior officials in some of the governments are talking about it and seeing how they can exchange ideas, but they don't find a common solution. I think that is more on a national level. So I totally agree. We need more cooperation to find a Nordic solution. But again, as we have seen with the discussion the last 2 days, the framework are so different between Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. So it's not easy to find one solution that fits all. So we still have to localize it to make it specific each case.
Any more comments? Yes. Woo. 2 more.
This is a direct quote from LABLAB's presentation. We have a need for space where to talk about the transformation and anchor it in democracy. Much of the transition is driven in Finland, at least, by companies. Would you leave the responsibility for better project management to companies, or would you change the democratic processes somehow?
I will try to answer this, and spare with me or criticize me also. I would like to refer to a conversation we're having during the coffee break. That we experience that the dialogue process is taken care of many times by the companies who wants to run a project, or maybe and that's great that the companies are stepping in there. But I also feel a sense that there is a moment where the dialogue cannot be part of the funded by the company, because the dialogue is a democratic, and then we're privatizing the democratic dialogue and putting responsibility in a company. So this is where I think that the municipalities should step in. But there is a challenge. The municipalities don't have the funds to that. It's very untangible, because our economic system does not allow that you have a budget of future dialogues. How many, how little. So that's a great challenge for municipalities to step into that field. Companies are requiring. Why are not the municipalities stepping in here? Citizens are requiring. Why is the municipality not stepping in here? And the municipality saying, we don't have the efforts to do that. So, yeah.
I would just supplement and say it's not only about they don't have the funds, they don't have the authority to do it. At least in the Danish system, local authority is like the planning authority. So the developer needs the municipality to say yes for their physical placement, plain løsning put. And the rest of that is a business between the developer and the private citizen. And this is why we also sometimes see these very vicious trends that one of these landowners choose to sell, and then the rest of the neighbors get furious because they get no money out of this, apart from a bit of compensation, and they weren't part of the process. And the local authority actually do not have a lot of intervention space. So I think just like landscapes evolve over time, so does regulations. So I do think you could look from the Danish side, like our politicians, on how we regulate this and whether it should be regulated differently. So it's more a question within the political control.
There was one more question somewhere. Yes.
Yes, well, thank you. The previous question was kind of a bit similar, and the discussion around it, kind of what is kind of also going on is that the municipalities are more and more looking at this kind of solutions when doing the town planning or zoning of places for example, data centers. They are already kind of providing the information for the investors and the data center players, and also at the same time for the inhabitants nearby. So there's this kind of trend going on. I don't know whether that will then in the end help really, because there's issues like kind of who gets the benefit and so forth. But yeah, that was you kind of did the discussion already around that. So thank you.
I would like to throw in one comment about data centers, and then that's at least my personal opinion. Maybe not LABLABs, or maybe it's LABLABs. Spare with me, Alexander. But no, I think we should start to make more ethical questions to data centers. What kind of content will be trafficking there? to put that kind of moral and ethical questions to data centers within the European Union context, within our democracies. The data centers are not just the traffic, a lot of material that is not good for our societies.
We had a discussion in Finland about one of the centers being for TikTok, for example. Yeah. Did I interrupt you?
No.
No? Any last words before we thank you and before we go for lunch? No? So we just thank you. We have, after lunch, we have Anders, who already commented. Anders will be speaking, and before Anders, it's Antti from Finland. Thank you, dear audience, and thank you. And I will also be bringing gifts for you.
And thank you to the moderator.